what is striking as a global philosopher, which was my journey, to live in these great traditions, spiritual and religious and enlightenment wisdom traditions, and to see a pattern that they're all recognizing that reality cannot be you can't draw a boundary around it. It's transfinite, it's infinite. And if it's infinite, then it's a source of all possibilities. You can't exclude anything from it. And furthermore, if it's infinite, you can't exclude it from where we are, because it's sourcing us. So all of the God names and first names of philosophers and spiritual leaders and visionaries, whether you call it Yahweh or Allah or Om or Brahman or Tao, they all saw it. Tao, for example, the Tao that is named in our everyday consciousness is not the Tao. Don't write the name of Yahweh. Why? Because the infinite force cannot be finitized in our adolescent technology, which is where we are humans across the planet. It's non-denominational. Equal opportunity. You could all be ego sapiens, right? And the word sapien is wisdom. Homo sapiens is a species of wisdom. Sapiens from the Latin is wisdom. But wisdom is to go into the zone, into the logos. And that's what our great teachers are calling. Socrates drank hemlock over this because, he saw that everyday culture, common sense, was talking about it, but we're not tapping the logos, the source of science and reason and truth and goodness and power. And so the journey of a human is to enter the logos. Well, as a philosopher, as a boy, I felt a call. I didn't understand it. I was delivering liquor for a liquor store in Manhattan. I born in Trinidad, lived in Jamaica, a couple of houses over from Bob Marley. Came as 11 years old to New York City, and growing up in the city. My father was teaching yoga in the YMCA in New York City back in 1948. That's huge. One of the earlier teachers of bringing that culture. And I was delivering liquor for a liquor store as a boy, young 13-year-old, 14-year-old, and walking the streets and looking at all these apartments and wondering how many people are suffering. And I almost start running tapes, and I focus on one window and keep that imagining, and then look at the next window, keep that tape running, and that family, and this person. Because I was delivering liquor and I didn't know to alcoholics who couldn't even come out to the store. And by the third tape that was running at the same time, my hair started to stand up. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what was going on. I was standing at a light. I said, wow, I was feeling goosebumps. And the next morning I started to write as a boy without knowing anything about philosophy. Always follow the universal light. Live in the universal light. Stay in the universal light. I started writing these things down. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then it was years later that when I went to college, my father said, you should be an engineer, a chemical engineer. Just arbitrarily. And I was going into engineering school. And I was dying because I knew that was not where I belonged. And there was someone down in South Campus in City College who was lecturing, Professor Irani, on philosophy. And I didn't know what that was. And I would go and listen to him. And I just was taken over by that. It was calling me. That's what I mean about the call. Everyone feels the energy of that, the call to the unified force. I didn't know. All I knew the next day, I knew I had a passion to find the connection, because of the call of the Logos. In other words, what I'm suggesting is that whether Abraham is being called by the infinite force, or Arjuna, the warrior in the Gita, his conscience is calling him, right? Or Socrates doesn't have the answer, but he knows the culture in the cave has not got the answer, right? And calling it out. Or Buddha is saying, hey, we've got to find the answer to the suffering. That's the Logos calling us, right? Because it's the infinite force. And if we have the sensitivity, and what I call the lensitivity, to step out of our more limited lens, to listen and respond to the call of the source, right? That's been the history of the evolution of wisdom and enlightenment in our scriptures. I just was enthralled and enchanted because I felt in this particular, I didn't know he was Zoroastrian in Bombay, India, right? But he had a goatee and an old-fashioned jacket, and he just symbolized the embodiment of a Kant or Hegel or one of these great philosophers. And wow, he's living, and he knew Einstein. Oh my God, that kind of feeling of a young kid. He says, I got a major in this. And that's why I failed my courses in North Campus, because I was not going to physics, math, and chemistry with a slide rule. right? But I was sitting in on his classes, enthralled by wisdom. Oh my God, by the person who he was. And so I was put on probation from a college. It says, you failed 3 courses, you're on the verge of being ejected. And my father, I told him I want to major in philosophy. He says, I'll disown you, right? Because he was very authoritarian. So I was in trouble about trying to major in philosophy and switch majors. But I did. It worked out. And I call it now that I've been gifted to understand the deep missing logic of the Logos. It was deeper than we thought. You can't talk about it, you got to be it. That's when Jesus is saying the Logos in the flesh in John, the Gospel, right? I am the way, I am the truth, I am, the life. Jesus. It's weird talk. And Buddha is saying the Buddha is the Dharma, is the Sangha. To end the suffering, we've got to upscript into the Buddha field. And Krishna in the Gita is teaching Arjuna that you're going to suffer in samsara and cut off unless you can come into Om. Right? You got to Om it and live it. And that's a yoga technology. So all these geniuses are opening pathways into the source. And what I saw is that, wow, as diverse as these are, and they are diverse, thank God, they're still tapping a common code. And we didn't realize it's a global source code. Why? Because the infinite has to be the source of all. Any possible language, any possible logic has got to tap the source. And we didn't quite get it. And so my journey as a philosopher, listening to the Logos, the call of the Logos, which is to be genuine philosophy, is to follow the path to that unifying infinite source. And in the Latin, unum, double, I found that I asked the question, why aren't people seeing this? Why, when Jesus is saying, I am the way, when Socrates is saying, know thyself above all, enter the Logos, and is drinking hemlock as punishment and death for it, and Buddha is saying, people are suffering, enter the Logos, as if, you learn to center in where everything is connected and co-arising. That's a material human, right? And yoga. So when I saw all of that, then I realized it's a common code. They're in their diverse languages, which are more tribalized, they're getting to a global missing code. And I was able to see it because of that boyhood call. Listen to the Logos. I began to see, as a young professor, I've been teaching 49 years at Haverford, one of the top colleges in the nation, founded by the Quakers, who were mystics who saw the whole Quaker, the name Quaker is a nickname. It's really the Society of the Friends of Truth. And in Philadelphia, where I've been teaching, outside of Philadelphia, William Penn, Penn's Woods, William Penn is a Quaker, and the founder of my department at Haverford College, founded by the Quakers, is a mystical philosopher, Rufus Jones. And I now step in 1968 into that space of the Quaker founders of Quaker College. And I find that it's just being dominated by thinkers who are still trained in academic thinking and not in the zone. There's a disconnect with the Quaker founders. We got lost in founders, I said to people, because we're not listening to the depth of it. So yeah, the code, seeing that there is a deep code that's been missing, and there was utmost importance and priority on the planet now, because our cultures are broken and busted with the dominance of this continued adolescent way of thinking, of talking about it and objectifying each other, and not realizing we're cutting each other up with our lens of my culture. I can't understand you, the Muslim. I can't understand. If I'm a Christian, I can't understand the scientists saying, we've got the truth. No, because I've got the truth, right? So wherever your lens is, you privilege your lens, and you don't want to give that up. But that's monologue. Monologue is where you don't realize you have a lens and you're seeing from your cultural truth the other through your lens. And you don't realize you may be imposing your lens on the other and violating her. So that the call of our great teachers was to be a compassionate human. You've got to rise out of monologue to dialogue, which is dialogos. Enter the Logos and meet each other, right? So even like Rumi, the great mystic of Islam, who realized Islam is surrender to Allah. And they're all children of Abraham. Jews, Christians, Muslims are children of Abraham, which is what? Surrender to the source. Put it first, right? And we're not able to do it because we keep putting our Isaac, our agenda, our technology, our smotherboard first. And it's really, it's destroying us in a real sense. It's urgent. So as my journey over 50 years in listening to the Logos and following that unum pluribus, I use it on the American penny, the founders of the United States documents, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That kind of e pluribus unum, out of the one, out of the many, pluribus unum. That's the source. So they were seeing that we're going to be a democracy, demos, we the people, when we learn how to find that code. And we're still colonized, because if you're using, so one of the innovations of my journey, which I feel blessed to see, as a logician, logicians are good at introducing a notation to clarify thought. And I had to help the people see when we're in ego-based thinking, monologue, and to get notation to help us see when we enter dialogue. And I introduced single strokes to mark when we're in the everyday way of thinking and talking about things, and double parentheses to mark when you enter the Christ voice, the Logos voice, the Buddha voice, the Yoga voice. And that's the missing code, the double brackets. So if people don't even know they have a lens, and to call out single bracket is already a major advance. Wow, I've got a lens, and it could be destroying my life and breaking up my marriage and objectifying my kids and breaking my democracy and ruining my life. And I didn't know that, right? My teachers didn't show me I've got a lens and it could be an adolescent lens. It's desourcing us from the Logos. And the great teachers are saying if you're desourced, you're going to perish. And to end the suffering, you've got to upscript, not download. To introduce those two dimensions, that they're interdimensional markers, because people didn't realize that the two files are conflated. And so if Jesus would speak, we predicate it. If Buddha speaks, we have yoga all around the country in the USA. But we're doing ego-based yoga, which is not yoga. Yoga is to stop and to let go of that smotherboard so we can rise into the Om space. For example, Christ is saying, unless you die, you can't be born again into the Christ script. I am the script, I'm the way. So once I got that over decades of teaching, I would say to my students, to answer your question, that if you come into class with me in this academic setting, and you've been brought here to one of the best colleges in the country, you women from Bryn Mawr, and you abandoned women from Haverford College, it's because you're hyper-literate, you're great at it. You've advanced at it, and it won you prizes to recognize and bring you here. But you have to be willing to recognize and call that out. If you're going to read Buddha's text, he's calling it out. And if you just use it, it's called predication. If you just predicate the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, you blow it. If you predicate Krishna speaking in the own voice into the ego voice, you're blowing it. If you bring Jesus down to the single bracket Jesus, you're losing it. If you put Socrates in the cave box, you're blowing it. So I say, if you're going to come into a laboratory with me, and I call it a lab, I felt I had to liberate liberal arts education because it was dominated by the colonized mind. It's a form of colonial. And even I say when I wrote a Declaration of Interdependence, by studying the Declaration of Independence, 1776, and I went down to Christ Church in Philadelphia, right in my backyard, and sat on the bench where George Washington sat, with the great founders right sitting around him, Jefferson and others, and meditated and looked at the Declaration of Independence. I was stunned to see it with fresh eyes, that these founding visionaries were saying that whenever any political band that brings us together compromises our dignity and our nobility, it is our duty and our right to separate. That's the language. Next paragraph, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? And then we form governments to protect that. And if any form of government violates that, it's our duty to call it out. So that's the principle of separation. Before I even talk about the British. So to get the British out is stage one. But if you keep this mind, then you got to get the brutish out. And we haven't done that. So that's why I write, as to say, when I wrote my Declaration of Interdependence, if we could pull off independence from this technology that dominates us, all the great wisdom teachers and scriptures are saying, let it go. Face it and let it go so you can rise. Right? We're going to be colonized people. So I say the American Revolution is unfinished. We've got to let it go. To just get the British out is just a preparation for the real question, which is, can we enter dialogue? Can we move from monologue humans, ego sapiens to logo sapiens. You see what I mean? So that's my journey in terms of tapping the code and seeing its life and death for us on the planet. Not just in America, across the planet, all through Europe. The European Union is, right, we're the divided states of America. Right? Not one nation under logos, indivisible. We're one nation, we're not one nation. Right? We're polarized. And so it's a matter of survival, Doug. You know, that. And so my students, when I take them through one semester of immersion in Buddha's text with the seeing single brackets and double brackets, they begin to say, OMG, oh my God, I'm getting it. Right? Buddha was speaking a whole different dimension of language. He wanted us to get in the zone. So athletes who have been in the zone realize that's a point of reference. Because a single bracket is surrounded by the double brackets. That's basic science. Why? Because the infinite source is what funds and makes possible any narrative, any worldview, any ideology, any logic comes from deep logic. That's just basic science. And once you see that, then enlightenment is not going from here to there. It's dropping this and realizing that you're already here. Your higher self is closer to you than you are. All the geniuses knew that. And we're cut off ourselves and cut off the other. And that's what leads to Holocaust and genocides, ethnic cleansing, Aleppo, right, the Middle East breakdown. Wherever we find a chronic breakdown. The split of India broke Gandhi's heart when India was split into Pakistan. Why? When Muslims and Hindus couldn't get along. I mean, it's same deep divide of the clash of words. Word war, culture war, ideology war. And America's broken over this. And the people aren't facing it. And so Trump to say, we have to get the people together. Let's get the people together. You can't just say that. Because the people will not become we the people if you're in monologue. We've got to rise into dialogos. And that's where diversity really kicks in, because the pluribus is still within the unum, the multiplicity. Why? Because the infinite force is so, the infinite unity is so profound, it's filled with infinite diversity. That's why Blake the poet says there's infinity in a grain of sand and eternity in an hour, right? If you break a piece of Om, you're going to get Om. You can't break it down. That's why the Quakers knew there's that of God in every person. To me, the alleged wisdom teachers around us who do not make a distinction between speaking wisdom into words of wisdom into the ego-mental space, the dominant adolescent technology, then they're showing they're not wise. They're not wise because sophistry is buying into that without thinking. Critical thinking, science, is when you realize, oh my God, I can't speak, right? When Einstein said problems generated at one level of consciousness cannot be solved at that level, he was almost prophetically seeing you got to rise to a higher consciousness, dimension, technology to solve the problems that are generated from polarization. So I think it's a good point. Question I'll ask, Doug. How many of our current coaches, life coaches, wisdom teachers, preachers, are seeing the difference between a single bracket Jesus and a double bracket Jesus? Between Allah, here, or Allah, the infinite. Between Moses, bringing the laws to Moses in the presence of the burning bush, in I am that I am, to God, bringing the laws of God. How many get that? You know, I wonder. And I think it's vital for our survival. We better get it. You know, we have to upscript. And we've had over 2,500 years of this. And we seem to be stalled because we're informationizing wisdom and spirituality. That's right. So you can have a Joseph Campbell. Bless him. I loved when I saw him 25 years ago come out. I was inspired. Someone's getting it. They're seeing the links across the mythologies and realizing that we have some common, there's a missing language here of a mythos. He almost said it, global. He didn't say it, but he was just saying, check it out. Right? And I was delighted to see that. But again, all of these people, these geniuses I love, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, right? Deepak Chopra, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind, right? Conversations with God, Return to Love. I love this. I love that these wisdom speakers are coaching the people with the best they've got. But what I've noticed, as long as you receive that high wisdom, and I think they're touching it in the zone. They're getting their unam call. And they're seeing, the visionaries are seeing it, but then they give it unconsciously into the single bracket culture. And that's not a good sign, because the teachers knew you can't do that. Because I think they haven't wised up to the fact, because none of us get, as we grow up and learn our language, that we're being coded. And then we just have our language, and we speak, and we exchange. We have our public culture and our democracy and our dialogue, our conversations, allegedly, without realizing we've got a lens, a deep implant. That's why I call it the motherboard. And to bring it out like this and say, OMG, when you're in it, you can't see it. You have to step back, right? You have to open a double bracket lens to see the single bracket. And then you say, oh man, that's what Buddha was saying. That's what Krishna is saying. We're not doing yoga yet. We're not Christing yet. Do you follow? We're not Mosing, you know. I mean, in a way, that's what Jesus as a Jew is teaching. You know, you got to be a Jew. Follow the laws of Abraham and Moses, you know. And if you understood them, you'd understand me, right? Because that's the Yahweh speaking. So it's huge. Are we getting it, or are we so implanted? So your question is great. It's what I've been facing. Why, after 2,500 years of getting these wisdom prescriptions, that we seem stalled, right? And our best brilliant coaches and life coaches and teachers and wisdom teachers speaking words of wisdom in this space are not words of wisdom, because they haven't seen the shift in the script. We don't realize that sin is encoded in the script we're using. It's sin script, right? The script, the technology, because we're talking about it. That's why the warning, don't write the name of God. Because if you take the double bracket infinite and you bring it into the finite, that's why Nietzsche says God is dead and the Christians killed him. Because without knowing it, we're good people. Humans are good people. We're well-intentioned, but we're duped by our implanted technology of culture making and self-making, and don't realize, wow, we're coded in an adolescent code. What I'm asking Doug, I mean, because I'm practicing this for decades with my students. When they come into the laboratory and they spend one semester going through the Buddha text or the Vedanta text, the yoga text, or the journey of Europe from Socrates to Heidegger, seeing who we are as humans, it's striking, you know, that is the highest. If you're going to come into this laboratory, you better be willing to do the deepest work. You're going to bring your oxygen mask, because you're going to have to call out your deepest implanted logistic operating system, mind operating process that got you here. Because our great geniuses are calling that out as problematic for us, right? And it's everyone's having. It's not just East or West, it's all humans at that level of adolescent maturation to become a mature logosapien from an ego sapien. And by doing that and helping them become aware, oh my God, I'm predicating. The word predication is to talk about it. And one of the axioms of Aristotle, the founder of logic, to think is to predicate. Socrates is wise, I'm a human, Haverford is a colleague, we predicate. But that's one level of thinking, but the other Buddhas and Krishnas are saying to think is to meditate, not to predicate. They were calling us to the higher form of integral thinking. Right? So when they see that, they realize, OMG, just to play with it, oh my God, right? I never knew, my mom never told me I'm predicating, and that it can be harmful if swallowed and implanted, right? I wish my mom told me that. But now I'm listening to Buddha, I'm listening to Jesus, I'm listening to Krishna, I'm listening to Socrates, and and so by seeing that and practicing it, and I circulate in class a ritual check-in sheet for the names. And I said, I'm not here to monitor your attendance, because you can come in and check in, but you're checking out because you're checking in. I want you to check in, to be here, right? And you'll see by the end of the class, if you survive, by the 26th last class, you might want to check in. Finally. Then now you're getting the missing calculus. It's amazing what happens. And I don't ask them to write papers on information and base, right, where they can Google. You can't Google God. You can't Google Buddha. You know, and that is what, so students really, it transforms their lives. That's liberal arts, liberating arts. to liberate the human from being stalled in the box and carrying that out as a factory into the public. It destroys our democracy. It destroys our marriages and relationships and love. You can't love in the box. You can't raise kids and slice them into that box. It's a form of child abuse. If you listen to our wisdom teachers, we're human, right? We're not objects. The greatest theory of ethics, never objectify a human. But our calculus is doing that. We objectify each other. And we don't realize we're violating our kids and ourselves and each other. And then we wonder why our relationships, we're not intimate, we're not working, it's not functional. Yeah. Because we're monologuing each other. And I'm calling it out, Doug, I'm sorry. It's time to call it out. You know, that's what I've been doing for 20, 30 years as a teacher and activist, you know. And the greatest activism, I call it activision, which is to see it. Because activism, to do more activism, there's global warming, there is water shortage, there is economic injustice, and we want to do activism here. But if the single bracket technology is blocking us, we can't be activists because we got to get that out. So activision is to see it. So that's why the Zen activist would say when the single bracket person is saying, don't just sit there, do something. And the Zen teacher says, don't just do something, sit there. Because if you see it, then you're changing the world with a new lens. Because we make our world with a lens. And if we're making a single bracket world, we're in a Tower of Babel. If we're making a double bracket world, we're human.